So let me just begin by saying how really good it is to be with you all today. It's always a joy and a privilege to share Sunday morning services with you, but today feels especially meaningful and important as we find ourselves on the cusp of what is perhaps the most important election in our nation's history. And if you haven't voted yet, vote, please. And let me just say a word of thanks to all of you who wrote postcards, made phone calls, sent texts as part of our UUCville Get Out the Vote effort. My understanding is that we as a congregation wrote and sent out over 1,500 postcards. A big shout out to the inexhaustible Ellie Siverud over there, as well as Flame and Raven. I don't know that they're here today, who also did some postcard writing and got people to write cards. And I'm just grateful to all of you who took the time to do that and to put your UU faith into action. Well, I, for one, from our conversation with the kids earlier, I'm not alone. I'm feeling kind of anxious about this Tuesday and the coming days, what they will bring. And although much of my anxiety is focused on the results of the election, I think it's symptomatic of something deeper that goes beyond one election. Over the last decade or so, and right up to today, our world has been pretty broken. We've experienced a lot of hardship and pain, fear and uncertainty, anger and division. I could easily spend the rest of my sermon this morning detailing all of our shared brokenness, but let me simply begin by saying that it is my own struggles with anxiety that make being here with you today so very important. When my heart is heavy and my life feels broken into pieces, there is nothing more comforting and healing for me than the blessings, the shelter, and the peace of Unitarian Universalism and this beloved community. Perhaps, like me, you are one of the many who find themselves anxious, uncertain, afraid, broken. Maybe you've been hurt recently or in the past by an angry outburst, a harsh word, or a negative judgment. Maybe your heart is heavy because of the loss of a friend or loved one. And perhaps you're feeling broken by the world we live in, a world that is so filled with beauty and blessing, but that feels so increasingly filled with all those things I listed earlier: fear and hate, demeaning and dehumanizing language, divisiveness that separates the human family into us and them, rather than bringing people together to listen and learn and grow. I don't want to suggest that brokenness is simply a product of the times we live in. As Brian Stevenson says so well, being broken is what makes us human. Everyone has experienced pain and loss, sadness and sorrow, tragedy and struggle. Brokenness is truly part of our common humanity. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb and suggesting that every person in this room has experienced a moment, perhaps like the one Brian Stevenson shared in that reading. After speaking to yet another client whose life had been so broken and who was on the verge of being brutalized by an unjust and racist criminal justice system, Stevenson found himself emotionally overwhelmed with a wet face and a broken heart. For the first time, he came to see just how broken into pieces his own life had become and just how much he needed to be healed. I want to spend the rest of my time this morning talking about our shared brokenness and what we can do, at least to begin repairing our lives and our world, so that we can live in what Brian Stevenson calls our reciprocal humanity. And I think, as we heard when we talked to the kids, maybe a first step in the long journey in healing at least some of that brokenness can be found in one of my favorite stories from the Christian New Testament. One day, while traveling in a boat across the Sea of Galilee, Jesus and his disciples encounter a powerful storm. Their boat is tossed about violently, and fear and panic grip the disciples. Rachel's putting up on the screen now this very beautiful and famous painting by Rembrandt, which portrays this scene. It's a little blurry, and we'll have a close-up of it in a second. Meanwhile, as the disciples are getting really, really frightened, Jesus is in the back of the boat, fast asleep. As the storm worsens, the disciples grow increasingly afraid and cannot believe that Jesus has, how should I say this, completely checked out. Finally, when they are certain that the boat is about to capsize, the disciples finally wake Jesus up, plead for his help, and ask if he doesn't care that they're all about to die. Now, according to the story, Jesus then calms the raging storm with 3 simple but transformational words. Peace, be still. Peace, be still. And as the wind ceases and the waters calm, Jesus turns to his disciples and questions why they are so afraid and have so little faith. By the way, Reverend Leah told me that the children are actually talking about this story as we speak in their children's worship this morning. Now, of course, we have no way of knowing what exactly happened in the moment or if Jesus and his disciples ever even got caught in a storm on the Sea of Galilee. But if they did, I'm guessing, using my imagination here, that maybe the miracle wasn't Jesus rewriting the laws of nature, but rather the miracle was his calm and soothing presence that stilled the storm in the hearts and minds of his disciples. I know this story speaks so powerfully to me because on so many days, especially these days, my heart feels as if it's in that storm-tossed boat. And like them, like the disciples, Jesus' simple words, peace, be still, peace, be still. Those words somehow help me to calm the storms inside my heart. They remind me to try to breathe, to let go of stress and anxiety, and to just give myself, even if it's for a moment, the gift of peace. Now, I think it's important to note, as we heard when Reverend Leah invited you all to call out ways that you deal with that knot in your stomach, if you don't mind me quoting you, Linda. There she is. There's no single right way or practice that one should follow in order to experience the healing gift of peace and stillness. What works for one may not work for another. Practices like we heard, meditation and prayer, can certainly be healing and calming. I think gatherings like our Vesper services that we recently held here in the church are another way to find our center and still those storms. What matters most is not which practice we utilize, but rather giving ourselves the time and space we need just to pause, to be, and to breathe. Whatever method or practice works best for you, the point is that when we slow down and find ways to still the storms in our hearts, the compassion that Bryan Stevenson talks about, compassion for ourselves and compassion for others, that compassion can begin to take root. And it is that kind of compassion for self and for others that, in my view, holds the key to healing brokenness in our own lives, in our communities, in our relationships, and in the world. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that compassion doesn't feel very deeply embedded these days in our culture, or I'm sorry to say, even in much of religion. Think for a moment about the so-called American way, right? Which values rugged individualism, success and achievement, particularly economic success and achievement, and rewarding those who pull themselves up by their bootstraps while deeming those less fortunate and less privileged to be failures who are getting what they deserve. And then, I'm sorry to say, there's religion. While so many, perhaps most religious traditions affirm love and compassion as core values, too often, what I think many people experience is just the opposite: judgment, fear, and exclusion. Is it any wonder that so many turn their backs on religion and look elsewhere for love and healing when they are feeling broken? And yet compassion, as Bryan Stevenson makes clear, offers that path. To be compassionate is to recognize both our own brokenness and the brokenness of others. Compassion literally means to suffer with. And having compassion involves, as one Buddhist teacher puts it, going inside our bodies, our feelings, and our mental formations, and rather than judging or condemning them, allowing ourselves to become deeply aware of our own brokenness and then also the brokenness of others. And when we are able to experience ourselves and others as we truly are, flawed, suffering sometimes, almost always in need of healing and wholeness, something truly extraordinary can begin to happen. We embrace our brokenness and the brokenness of others as an invitation to love and care rather than as reasons to judge or condemn. We see ourselves and others as we truly are, not who others judge or tell us we should be. And the more I reflect on Bryan Stevenson's powerful words, the more I think maybe, just maybe, he has put his finger on the key to healing, or at least beginning to heal the stark and often bitter divisions that so often feel as if they are tearing our country and world apart. Think for a moment about just how divided we are and how much anger, how deep those divisions are. What would the world look like if rather than starting from a sense of moral superiority, I'm right and you're wrong, or demonizing and othering people, demonizing those we disagree with, what if instead we began by assuming, as Stevenson does, that each and every person is broken, that the lives of those with whom we differ are also in pieces, just as we are. And if we began to see that we are all broken together, maybe, just maybe, we could begin to extend compassion to all. And when we extend that compassion, we cannot help but turn it into action. That action might be as simple as finding one thing every day to appreciate about ourselves or another. It might be offering a kind word to someone from whom we have become distant because of pain we have caused them or that they have caused us. And compassion might lead us to move beyond our own comfort zones to courageously confront privilege and our discomfort and the injustices so that we can act for justice and peace for all people and the planet. And it is the power of compassion to heal our brokenness that leads me back to the title of my sermon today, Broken Together. You see, in the midst of all the turmoil, the hurt, the tension, and all the brokenness we encounter and experience, the one thing we can count on, the one thing that can help us begin to heal our broken places, and I believe this with all my heart, is each other. The simple truth is we are not alone in our brokenness. We don't have to pull ourselves up by our emotional bootstraps or maintain a stiff upper lip. While we Unitarian Universalists often have far more questions than answers and as much uncertainty as certainty, there is one thing we know. There is in this world love, kindness, and compassion. No matter how broken our lives become, we have each other. I can't tell you how many times my life has been pieced back together by the compassionate words and deeds of others. In those moments when my spirits have been especially low, the love and support of family, friends, colleagues, congregants have helped still the storms in my heart and put me on that path to healing and hope. Before closing, I want to say a word about our church community. I don't think I'm alone in observing that, like many of us as individuals, religious communities are experiencing much the same brokenness that we are feeling in our own lives and in the world. We are still making our way back from a terrible pandemic, and many in this congregation are still dealing with the trauma of the Unite the Right violence in 2017. But as we continue to heal, we can take comfort in knowing that we are doing important work in this congregation and in the wider world. Work that is guided by the same kind of compassion Brian Stevenson talked about. But what makes me so proud to be your minister, and what makes me so hopeful about the future is that we are ready to do the work of love and justice, compassion and peace. If you haven't read our long-range plan yet, take a look at it. It's on the website. It's ambitious, challenges us to be bold and courageous, compassionate and just. Of course, we have a long way to go and a lot more growing and healing ahead of us. But we are in this together. We are one beloved community, and we most certainly have the shelter and the inspiration of each other. So let me conclude by just recalling Brian Stevenson's beautiful, beautiful words. There's no wholeness outside our reciprocal humanity. Reciprocal humanity. That's what the world needs. That's what it feels like we're lacking in our communities, in our country, in the Middle East. Whatever happened to the reciprocal humanity? Just think what a world it would be if the human family could finally live as if reciprocal humanity was a fact, not an ideal. So many who come through our doors are seeking community and healing, a community that journeys with us through the joys and sorrows of life, and that helps heal those places in our lives and in the world that are broken. One church can't heal or repair the world, but this is a place where we can come together, where we can offer one another a kind word, a hug of support, where we can always know that no matter what we are going through in this life, we are not going through it alone. And knowing that we are not alone is the first and most important step on the journey to healing, to wholeness, and to peace for ourselves and for the world. Amen. Thank you for listening, and blessed be.